It started as a joke, something silly to pass the time at Mia's 18th birthday sleepover. The air was thick with laughter and the sugary buzz of soda and cake when Lily, the self-proclaimed daredevil of the group, suggested playing the reflecting game. It's just a stupid urban legend, she said with a grin, twirling a strand of her platinum blonde hair. You chant your name backward in front of a mirror at midnight. Supposedly, it's supposed to reveal your future or something. Reveal your future, or summon a demon, Alex teased, raising a skeptical eyebrow. He was the only guy at the party. Mia's childhood friend turned awkward crush. Come on, Lily urged. It's harmless fun, unless you're chicken. Mia rolled her eyes, but her friend's excitement was infectious. As the clock crept toward midnight, they gathered candles and a large antique mirror that Mia's mom kept in the basement. Its ornate gold frame gleamed ominously in the dim light of the living room. All right, everyone ready? Lily asked, lighting the final candle. They sat in a semicircle around the mirror, their reflections flickering and distorted in the candlelight. The room felt colder, though Mia convinced herself it was just her imagination. We all do it at the same time, Lily instructed. Say your full name backward 3 times. Easy. They began, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of jumbled syllables. Mia's tongue stumbled over her own name, but she pushed through, her gaze locked on her reflection. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a gust of wind snuffed out the candles, plunging the room into darkness. What the hell? Alex muttered, fumbling for his phone flashlight. The light flicked on, illuminating their uneasy faces. The mirror, however, remained pitch black, as if it no longer reflected the room. Lily reached out to touch it, but Mia grabbed her wrist. Don't, Mia said, her voice shaking. It's just a mirror, Lily insisted, though her bravado faltered. The group stared at the mirror in silence, their unease growing. Then, Mia noticed it. Her reflection wasn't moving. While she sat frozen, her mirror image cocked its head, a slow, deliberate motion that sent a chill down her spine. Did anyone else see that? Mia whispered. Before anyone could answer, the reflections began to change. Alex's mirror image grinned unnaturally wide, stretching his mouth to impossible lengths. Lily's reflection stood up, even though Lily herself remained seated, and began tapping on the glass from the inside. The tapping grew louder, more frantic, until it sounded like thunderous knocking. We need to stop this, Mia said, her voice barely audible over the noise. She grabbed the nearest candle and tried to relight it, her hands trembling. How do we stop something that hasn't started? Alex snapped, his voice tinged with panic. Mia didn't respond. Her eyes were glued to the mirror as her reflection turned toward her, its face now contorted into a grotesque parody of her own. It mouthed something she couldn't hear, but the words felt like a scream in her mind. Let me out. The mirror cracked, a single jagged line slicing through the glass. The room fell silent, the knocking abruptly ceasing. For a brief moment, they dared to hope it was over. Then, the cracks began to spread, and with a deafening shatter, the mirror exploded outward, showering them in shards of glass. When the chaos settled, they realized the room was empty. The reflections were gone, no longer in the glass, no longer in their places. Alex, Lily, and Mia stared at each other in horror. Where did they go? Lily whispered. I don't think they went anywhere, Alex replied, his voice hollow. He pointed to the largest shard of mirror on the floor. Mia picked it up and felt her stomach drop. In the reflection, her face stared back, but it wasn't hers. The eyes were darker, the smile colder. From somewhere deep in the house, a faint, mocking laugh echoed. The game wasn't over. It had only just begun. Clara was excited to move into her first solo apartment. The building was a little old, but the rent was cheap and the neighborhood seemed safe. Besides, it had character, the ivy-covered brick, the quaint courtyard, and the vintage charm of the creaky wooden floors. It felt like the perfect place to start fresh. Her new home was on the 3rd floor, with a large window overlooking the street. The landlord had mentioned there was only one other tenant, an older man who lived on the ground floor. Clara found this reassuring. Fewer neighbors meant more peace and quiet. She met him on her second day while hauling groceries up the stairs. He was standing in the dimly lit hallway, watching her with an unnervingly wide smile. Need a hand? He asked, his voice cheerful. Clara hesitated but decided not to be rude. Sure, thanks. He introduced himself as Mr. Grayson. His eyes never seemed to blink as he carried her bags up the stairs, the same grin plastered on his face. Clara thanked him awkwardly and closed her door, unsettled by his overly friendly demeanor. In the weeks that followed, Clara noticed Mr. Grayson frequently. He was always around, tending to non-existent plants in the courtyard, sweeping the already clean hallway, or just standing by his window, staring out with that unyielding smile. She tried to ignore it, brushing it off as quirky old man behavior. One evening, Clara came home late from work. As she approached the building, she saw him standing at the entrance, late night. He asked, his teeth gleaming in the yellow glow of the streetlight. Yeah, she replied, fumbling with her keys. You should be careful, he said, his smile never wavering. Lots of dangerous people out there. His words sent a shiver down her spine. Once inside, Clara double-locked her door. She told herself she was overreacting, but something about Mr. Grayson felt off. Weeks passed, and the unease grew. She started hearing strange noises at night. Faint tapping sounds on her walls and the soft creak of floorboards in the hallway. Once, she swore she heard footsteps stopping right outside her door. Peering through the peephole revealed nothing but an empty corridor. One day, Clara's curiosity got the better of her. She Googled the building, hoping to find some history on it. Buried in old articles was a story that made her blood run cold. Years ago, there had been a tenant who vanished under mysterious circumstances. The police had no leads, and the case was never solved. Clara's apartment had been their home. She decided to confront Mr. Grayson. Maybe he knew something about the history of the building. But when she knocked on his door, there was no answer. The hallway smelled faintly of bleach, and a chill hung in the air. As she turned to leave, she noticed something peculiar. The curtains in his apartment never moved, not even when the windows were open. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, when she heard it again, the tapping. This time, it was louder, more insistent. She sat up, her heart pounding, and realized it was coming from her bedroom wall. Gathering her courage, Clara pressed her ear to the wall. The tapping stopped. Instead, she heard something else, a faint, raspy whisper. "Let me out." Clara leapt back, her blood running cold. She grabbed her phone and called the landlord. No answer. She left a shaky voicemail, begging him to come check the apartment. The next morning, she woke up to a knock at her door. Relieved, she hurried to open it, expecting the landlord. Instead, Mr. Grayson stood there, holding a tray of cookies. "Thought you could use a treat," he said, his smile wider than ever. Clara stared at him, her instinct screaming to shut the door. "Thanks, but I'm not hungry," she managed, her voice trembling. "Oh, but I insist," he said, stepping closer. His grin stretched impossibly wide, his teeth unnaturally sharp. She slammed the door and locked it, her hands shaking. She decided she couldn't stay another night. She began packing her things, throwing clothes into bags with frantic energy. As she worked, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Why are you leaving so soon?" Her breath hitched. She looked around the room, suddenly feeling watched. The window. She turned slowly and saw him. Mr. Grayson was standing in the courtyard, staring up at her window with that terrible smile. She grabbed her keys and bolted out of the apartment. She didn't stop running until she reached her car. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror. In the back seat, a faint reflection grinned back at her. Ethan had taken the night shift at the call center to pay his bills while finishing college. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was easy enough. Most of the calls came from frustrated customers, their voices blending into a monotonous blur of complaints and demands. He'd grown numb to it. One night, just past 2 a.m., the phone rang. Ethan's headset beeped as he connected the line. "Thank you for calling Horizon Solutions. This is Ethan. How can I assist you?" For a moment, there was silence. Then, a woman's voice broke through, trembling and weak. "Hello, please, you have to help me," she said. Ethan sat up, his drowsiness evaporating. "Ma'am, what's the issue?" The woman's breathing was shallow, panicked. "I don't know where I am. I think someone's following me." Ethan frowned. This wasn't the kind of call they usually handled. "Are you safe right now? Can you see anything around you?" Her response was cut off by static, and the line went dead. Ethan checked the system, but the caller ID was blank, no number, no trace. He told himself it was probably a prank, albeit a disturbing one, and tried to shake it off. The next night, the phone rang again at the same time. "Thank you for calling Horizon Solutions. This is Ethan. How can I assist you?" Silence, followed by a faint sob. "It's me again," the woman whispered. Ethan's pulse quickened. "Are you all right? Where are you?" "He's closer now," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, you have to help me. Who's closer? Can you describe him?" Ethan asked, glancing around the empty office as if someone might be watching. The line crackled, and her voice grew distant. "He's here." Then, the call ended abruptly. Ethan stared at his monitor, frustrated. He flagged the incident to his supervisor, but the response was dismissive. "We're not the police, Ethan," his boss said. "Just log it and move on." But Ethan couldn't move on. Something about the woman's voice lingered in his mind, the raw terror, the way she'd spoken directly to him, as if he were her only lifeline. Over the next week, the calls kept coming, always at the same time. The woman's pleas grew more desperate, her voice more faint. Ethan tried everything he could think of, tracing the calls, recording them, even searching online for missing persons reports, but he found nothing. The number remained untraceable, and his coworkers started teasing him about his phantom caller. One night, determined to figure out what was going on, Ethan stayed late. As the clock ticked toward 2 a.m., he felt a heavy sense of anticipation. Right on cue, the phone rang. "Please," the woman's voice cracked. "He's almost here." Ethan's throat tightened. "Ma'am, listen to me. Who is he? Where are you?" "Give me something to work with." Her reply was barely audible. "He doesn't want me to tell." Suddenly, Ethan's computer screen flickered. The overhead lights dimmed, and the air around him grew icy. He glanced at the call log on his monitor, and for the first time, a number appeared. Oh. "What the?" Ethan muttered. A low, guttural sound came through the headset, like a growl. Then, a new voice, deep, raspy, and full of malice, spoke. "Stop answering her calls." The line went dead. Ethan yanked off the headset, his heart racing. He spun around, half expecting to see someone behind him, but the office was empty. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The voice haunted him, its warning echoing in his mind. When his shift started the next evening, he felt a sense of dread he couldn't shake. But curiosity won out. He couldn't ignore the calls. At 2 a.m., the phone rang again. His hands trembled as he picked it up. "Ethan," the woman's voice was barely a whisper. "He's here." Before he could respond, the line filled with static. Then, he heard something that made his blood run cold. His own voice. "Help me," it said, distorted and echoing. "Please, help me." Ethan dropped the phone, his breathing ragged. He stared at the monitor, which now displayed a single message in bold red text. He never left. The room plunged into darkness, the hum of the office replaced by an oppressive silence. Ethan felt a presence behind him. Slowly, he turned, but there was no one there. Or so he thought. In the reflection of the darkened monitor, he saw it. A figure standing just behind his chair, its face twisted into a grotesque smile. The line on his desk phone lit up again, ringing incessantly. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The whisper came directly into his ear.